Welcome back to So Mom, the podcast where my daughter and I dive into the big, messy, beautiful realities of parenting, resilience, and change. Hello, Adele.
Hello, Mom. What did you do this week? Were you diving into any realities of change?
Yeah, just the weather change.
I was diving into my child's messy room.
Oh, really?
I shouldn't say messy. I think it's organized by
Chaos, organized chaos.
I was diving into helping him think about relieving himself of some of that chaos.
He's
a pack rat.
Not a pack rat. I was going to say he's not a hoarder because there's no pathology, and he knows where everything is.
I know. So I don't like to go in too much because I know everything has its place, but sometimes it feels like it's coming out from under the door.
Yeah. There's a little ooze.
It creeps into that room, that little room just past where I'd like to work. And I sometimes feel like, hey, guy. Hey, buddy.
He is a little bit. You can kind of see the detritus following him.
It's like, I just want to pack up some of this and send it off.
So sweet.
What'd you do this week?
I didn't do anything except sort of enjoying the rain of all things.
You like it? You like these months?
I do. Living on the East Coast, I dreaded January, February, March. I was in such a countdown to spring. It was so cold and the sun never shone. So I love a day that it's dark and I can just read. And
there's a Scottish term. Julie and I are writing that book set in Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
Our follow-up.
Yeah.
And so we get all this random Scottish information, but I think the term is called Hurkle-durkle.
Oh, yeah, sure. I know that.
For just staying in bed?
Yes.
I love it.
I'm new to this expression.
These are the Hurkle-durkle months.
They are. I love the idea of them being able to say, what is a good doctor? Who is a good doctor? What does it take to be a good doctor? And it isn't just your ability, it's also your personality.
Yeah, they give such a range of characters. So I think it's been, this doctor is good for this patient, and they send different doctors in to deal with different cases. And you realize that they're sort of matching up the trauma with the doctor. It's a good show.
It is. Coincidentally, we have a doctor today, medical doctor, on our show, which will be very exciting. We are going to be continuing to talk about adolescence and how to survive it and embrace it. So this is a perfect guest who has maybe the best bedside manner ever, or podcast manner, Dr. Dolly Klock, who is a board-certified family medicine physician, founder of Adolescence, speaker, consultant, and mom of two. Dr. Klock holds a BS from UCLA, an MD from Albany Medical College, and completed her family medicine residency at Brown University Memorial Hospital of Rhode Island. She has over 20 years' experience helping families connect over tricky topics and believes that the best preventative medicine is delivered via effective health education. She began her career in clinical practice before pivoting to focus on adolescent health education. Through Adolescence, she blends medical expertise with real-world parenting insights, offering workshops and coaching that reframe adolescence as a stage of growth and possibility. Welcome, Dr. Klock.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you.
So, my question is, you transitioned from practicing medicine to launching Adolescence, and it's your business that really blends health education and real-world parenting.
Yeah.
So what inspired that? Because that's a big pivot. And what was the biggest challenge in shifting from physician to entrepreneur?
Yeah, it was a giant pivot, and one that took me some time to wrap my own brain around. Basically, it came from, some logistical issues, being a parent of young kids at that time, and being married to another physician, and between my call schedule and his call schedule, I wanted some more flexibility, and I've always been kind of a creative mind and thinking about what else can I do. And I decided, partially because of what I was experiencing as a parent of younger kids at that time, I realized like how much support people needed when it came to talking with their kids about bodies and puberty and sex and all of that. And I was really inspired by my own patients, particularly my teenage patients who sometimes would come in because they were nervous that they were pregnant or they were afraid they had a sexual infection. And what a difference I saw when they came in alone and scared and were being brought up in families where there was no conversation about sex and where sex was just not allowed, but yet they were sexually active and nervous, compared to the ones who came in with their parents. Who had already talked through everything and they were coming together as a team. And it was like this healthy, open relationship. So I became very passionate about helping to foster those kinds of conversations. And so I had this idea, like if I ever decide to pivot, which I eventually did, this is what I would want to do. I would want to help families connect over these kinds of topics, and have more open-ended time to just work with tweens and teens and parents, young adults, and that's what I eventually did.
I'm so glad you did. I wish you had been around when I was parenting.
I could hear you thinking that.
I know. But, I had a mother who, back in the dark ages, she never talked about sex.
My mom didn't talk about it.
She didn't talk about it at all.
Right.
In fact, I don't know how, I think we knew what we knew by reading chapters of Peyton Place in school.
Yes.
I went to a girls' school and we'd each have a chapter and pass it along. And that was not good education. Yeah. And I remember my mom, I was not particularly, back then, I don't think many girls in my class, well, there were some who were sexually active, but not the class. And we were all trying to piece together what this meant. And my mom, one night, was frustrated with me, and she called me a slut. Oh, wow. And I thought, what a mean thing to say to me. And I sort of harbored this. And years later, I said, why did you call me a slut? Yeah. And she said, well, I saw your clothes all over your room. And I said, do you mean slob? And that's what she thought.
She thought she had said slob, and for all those years, you had been labeled a slut by your own mother.
How did I become a slut with so little knowledge?
Gosh, that's amazing.
But so I wasn't particularly well equipped, to deal with these issues with my kids. And it was very much... And I was a single mother for a lot of that, so it was a little bit trial and error.
If you had adolescence as a sort of... Well, I know I'm wondering which of the three of us, if you had that resource, which child would you have? Or all of us?
Which child would I have sent?
Yes.
All of you. All of you.
Well, I remember in the 80s that, you were a great, very open mom. I had good conversations with Mom.
I was hoping we would get into this. I wanted to hear.
I did. I felt like I could go to my mom. I could talk to my mom. But there was a lot that was happening in the 80s, especially in terms of the AIDS epidemic that we were right in, that just reframed any conversation about sex as a conversation about danger.
That's right. Some parents I encounter are very open and they've already talked with their kids, but they want it reinforced by someone like me, and then there's others that for what, it was never modeled for them, or maybe they've had their own sexual trauma and that makes having these conversations complicated, or they come from very religious backgrounds. And, so it's very layered and different from person to person. But
if it hadn't always felt that there was so much messaging around, you better, everybody took HIV tests. Everybody was, kind of like in that really frightened, not very much information, It was very sad. It
very
was a
heavy,
hard time.
Right? There was like heavy. This weight to something.
Yeah. It was terrifying. My personal internist came, who I loved, but she was an authority on AIDS, and so I had her come speak to the girls. And basically her message was, you are not having sex with one boy who's your boyfriend, you're having sex with every single person.
That was such the mantra of that time. What was lost in that time was probably that opportunity to talk about some of the more positive sides of sexuality, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, eventually, as parents, if we can project into the future, we all want our kids to be healthy, right? And have a healthy adult sexual life, which to do that, you need to have a little bit of guidance and conversation in terms of figuring out, who you're attracted to and what your values are around sex, which looks different for every person, right? And what you want or what you don't want out of an encounter and in a partner, and how do you communicate your boundaries and your desires and all of that. And that's very evolved, right? That's not the first conversation, but when kids are only getting that fear-based aspect, they lose that opportunity to have these other discussions.
And somehow I think that in a way it leaked into other things, like self-image, or just sort of the idea of body health was, well, if you look better, or if you can fix it, or if you can hide it, it wasn't really about being healthy. It was about sort of appearing, like the appearance that everything was okay, the appearance that you were doing well, sort of felt like it was all kind of packaged up in the same thing of not talking about it and just kind of like getting through it and not asking, sort of siloing yourself.
Well, and I think some of that is just so typical of adolescence, right? And like sort of what, there's so much comparison going on and so much thinking, feeling judged all the time. And what is it that people see when they look at me or think of me? And now it's worse in a way now, because now there's social media and talk about, appearance, right? I mean, there's a lot of fixation on actual physical appearance and the image that teens are putting out to the rest of the world, which creates a whole other set of pressures and stressors. And
I worry about that as a parent. I mean, I worry about how to counter that, the messages, those kinds of messages, and like how they're figuring out on their own versus me talking about something that I don't know a lot about,
right. It's so interesting you say that, because I hear that so often from parents, because I think we feel like our kids are such experts in the technology and social media, and they are, like, they're living in it from a much younger age, and they are so adept at using it. But we have to remember that we have this wisdom, and we actually have experienced a lot of the same stuff as they're going through. And it's okay to, by the way, let them be the expert. That's often an opener to some of these conversations. But I think it's really healthy for them to hear from their parents, like how they're feeling, or my gosh, if I'd had all of that when I was a teenager. I remember when I was a teen, I would feel like this way. And how do you even manage that now, and just meeting them with curiosity. We can't, obviously some limits around all that tech use depending on their age, but most importantly, I think just being open and having conversations. I mean, that's like the common theme in my work when I work with parents, is really just be real with your kids, and honest and authentic and open, and have them realize that you are approachable and you are askable about all of this stuff, whatever tricky topic we're talking about, because so that they don't feel like they're going to be shamed or they're going to be judged.
Meeting them with curiosity, I think, is such a good phrase. I find that I meet my kids a lot with just like word salad.
Yes. It's probably especially if you're feeling nervous about the topic, right? Yeah.
I feel like they'll come and they'll have one little thing they wanted to ask me, and I'm like, chapter 14, like they just back away from me if I feel like, oh, we're in a moment of openness, and I just want to meet them with curiosity and maybe a little less
and
of
less.
myself.
Yes,
Yeah.
little pearls. I always say, like the classic thing that every sex educator says is like, you want to have a 100 1-minute conversations, not 100-minute conversation, right? So just little snippets at a time. Use the teachable moments that just come up, as you're living your life, or something you see, you watching a show together, a movie together, talk about those characters just briefly, and there's ways to kind of weave in your values just sort of gently as you do that, without making it a big sit down, all encompassing lecture that is not going to go well or be well received.
No, that is true. I once said to John, when he was talking to his son a lot, and I said, you know what he's doing? Waiting for you to stop
talking.
And then he's going to go on. But I remember talking to Adele's the other brother.
Yes.
She has 2 younger brothers, the older of the 2.
Yes.
And he was in 7th grade, and he had, this nice group of friends, and he would come and ask me questions because he didn't have his dad around. And so I remember he was asking things about just sort of that beginning interest in girls and sex. And he said, what does it mean if this happens? And what is second base? I remember him saying this, and I explained it to him thinking, I was just, I didn't have you right there. So I did the best I could. And he looked at me and said, he asked me another question, and he said, thanks, Mom, and don't ever look at me as though we had this conversation.
That's sweet. So cute. I mean, but what a gift that he came to you. A lot of boys go to their moms even when dad's right there, just because sometimes.
Do they?
Yes, and it's so interesting because I've had moms say to me, like, I feel like my husband should be talking about all of this. And I said, well, ideally, the kid's hearing from all the trusted adults in their life in some way. But if they're coming to you, right, and they have that questions, and you have established that relationship, you're just as, you don't have to share the body parts, right, in order to give sound advice, and you don't have to know everything, and you can look things up, and so I love that he came to you, and I love that you took it on, and even if you were feeling like you wanted to throw up a little bit while you were doing it.
I did want to throw up a little bit,
yeah.
but we did get through it.
And I think teens are really good at sniffing out who's authentic and who's just like giving them facts and who respects them as human beings.
What are you hearing from students? What is on their minds? What are they talking to you about?
So, I think it depends on kind of the context in which I'm seeing them. Like, they are heading off to high school and they want me to talk with them about relationships, or they're heading off to spring break and they're concerned about like party culture, things like that. I think on a more global level, they're thinking about a lot. They're thinking about the political climate, they're thinking about climate change, they're thinking about big stuff on top of, they're thinking about all the college stuff from a shockingly young age. I do hear a lot about stress. Everyone talks about stress and the things that are causing stress in their lives, and some of them really are under a lot of stress.
And stress is such a big one because I think they use it in so many different ways. It's just shorthand for everything. I'm so stressed. Yeah. I heard it every day, all day. I'm so stressed. But
right. And who's more stressed than whom and why?
Yes,
right?
yes, that's
my
right.
kids definitely have stress offs. It's like, oh, you've heard your day. Now we're going to hear about my day.
Yeah.
What are signs that a young adolescent might be struggling emotionally because of social media? I mean, are there things to watch?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the areas of concern is around body image, right? If you have a child of any gender that is struggling with their body image to begin with. That's something to be just paying a little extra attention to and having some conversations about it. I think talking with kids just about the amount of time they're on there and how they're spending that time, right? Because it's not all created equal. So there are kids who might be on there a lot, but they're doing something productive or creative, or even educational, versus those who are just sort of mindlessly scrolling. I think when it's getting in the way of them doing the other stuff that they should be doing, or they're suddenly losing interest in activities that they used to really enjoy, and now they kind of don't want to be doing anything than sitting in their room online or gaming excessively. A little bit of gaming is great. But
I have a son who is very interested in climbing.
Yeah.
And when he's finished climbing, he then watches climbing.
Uh-huh.
And I can't figure, this is ongoing in my head. I'm like, what is coming off the high of the day of climbing?
Yes.
What is just wanting to be sort of, checked out downtime?
Right.
What is actually studying the climbing? I feel like I can really, and sometimes I feel like no matter how I'm thinking about this, I'm probably not thinking about it the right way. And that is a refrain I feel with my mom friends. It's like we have so many ways that we're trying to be the right parent, but we're kind of sometimes just feel like, throw up your hands.
I know.
You're not doing it right.
Because it's like, it's so hard to monitor it all, especially as they get older, So I think if you can establish this relationship with your child where you're just like, I'm going to plop down next to you on the couch once in a while. Like, well, show me what, who do you love to watch? Like, not in a negative way. Like, oh, I know you love watching these climbing videos. Is there someone a particular account that you really enjoy? Like, can you show me, and be curious again. It comes back to that curiosity and have them kind of show you what's on there and teach you about it. And invariably you will see something that you feel like, this doesn't fit, and then again, you can kind of ask questions without judging them for following that person or watching that person or saying they shouldn't say that. Just be like, oh, what do you think they mean when they, say that? Or, oh, wow, this person seems to also be giving a lot of nutrition advice. Like, what's that? Oh, are they also a nutritionist? No, they're just like, oh, wow, I wonder if there are any climbers who have a nutrition degree. Like, that might be someone to, to check into. Like, there's, just
I like that.
Right. So just find little ins based on their interest. And then I think just more globally is really looking at, again, are they getting enough sleep? Right.
I've had a lot of conversation with fathers who say, have I done enough? My friends are doing X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
Do I need to have 10 tutors lined up?
That's right. Well, and some of it is this weird, it really does come back, some of this, to this whole sense of college scarcity, and people are trying to pave the path for their kids to achieve a certain level of success in terms of future careers or college placement or things like that. Like, how, there's a keeping up with the Joneses piece. And I often tell parents, sometimes you got to just put on your blinders, and just pay attention to your family, to your kid, to your own values, and turn out the noise. Because when people are doing all that comparing and feeling like they have to pile on more and more stuff in order to get their kids to where they need to go, then oftentimes what falls by the wayside is family time. Meals together, the just time to chill together, watch a show together, right? And that's where the real connection comes. And so when we miss all of that, we miss some important opportunities to build that relationship with our kids that can actually be so protective in many ways. And also the parenting, there's so much parenting advice. And now with all the amazing podcasts, I wish I had more time to live. I learned so much from all of that. Sometimes you just have to trust your own gut, right? Think about what feels right when you're parenting your child and not worry about everybody else.
So, Dolly, we end, you may know, with book recommendations.
Oh, okay. Well, since you're a fiction author, I'm going to give you a fiction book.
I'm excited.
I read this one years ago, but because we've been talking about teenagers. Did you ever read Age of Miracles?
No.
I wish I remembered the author. I'm sorry. I don't. And I'm
We'll
looking
put it
at
in
an
the-
author
we'll put it in the
saying that.
notes.
Okay. So it is this like coming of age meets like sci-fi dystopian novel. And it's about a young teen, a girl, and she is living during it. I think it took place in California. And basically the rotation of the earth starts to slow imperceptibly at first, but then the days get longer and longer. And it's like, but she's just like going through her life and dealing with like regular teenager stuff, but with that backdrop. And I just loved that book.
Well, that does sound good.
Sounds so good.
You've started a book club, a family book club.
I did, but
but neither of your children have opened the book. We're all reading.
we're working on it.
But maybe this
Baby
would
steps.
be
Yeah, baby steps. I'm not pushing this book club, but I'm hoping. I just finished a book called Say Everything. It was a memoir by Ione Skye, who was a sort of a Hollywood star in the 80s, 90s. But it was less about Hollywood, although it was deeply about Hollywood because that was her whole world of just living here. She was the daughter of a single mom. Her dad was a pop star, Donovan, the folk singer, but not in the picture. So she was sort of pretty scrappy, kind of made her own luck. And it's really about, it's as interesting about all of the things that I thought as a Gen X 80s teen, were so real to me. And sort of to go back to our conversation earlier, just sort of all of the pressures, the body image pressures and all the things she was dealing with, the AIDS, the crisis, the feeling really weird about sort of being a sexual person on film, being very young, 17, but in a bigger way, I felt like it was a real meditation on her authentic life and what was home when she had lived everywhere, and what was meaning, and what was it was a very meditative memoir. I really loved it. It was very personal.
Wow.
So
That's great.
I just finished it and I thought, it's just great. I had picked it up really on a whim, but now I'm hand selling it everywhere.
Love that.
Loved it.
So my book is by someone I love, Adam Grant, and it's called Think Again. And it's been fun because I read a lot of fiction. And I love fiction, but I always try and as soon as I feel that I've read 10 books of fiction, I'll have a nonfiction spurt. I really like Adam Grant because I feel he's thoughtful. I think he came out a little strong talking about social media because I think there's a lot of good that comes out for kids. Yeah. But I love the whole idea of Think Again because it's really about having a growth mindset as a parent. And don't get so stuck. Don't get stuck in your own echo chamber, which is very hard to do in this political climate. I think people are stuck in their echo chambers and they don't want to hear from anyone else. And we get stuck with our own friends and our own way of life. And I like the idea of just being open, thinking, well, maybe I didn't do that correctly, or maybe there's another way of thinking through this issue or this problem. And so I took it as a wonderful guide for anyone who's wants to read, just to push themselves a little bit thinking about parenting. And he's so thoughtful and he's so, generous.
Yes.
A generous writer.
That seems like a good book for our times right now.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. This has been so wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate this. We've been thinking about it and so excited about having you.
And so fun getting to know you too, Adele. And I love this podcast. I love all things mothers and daughters. So
this has been great.
It's really cool.
It's been so much fun. I was talking to someone, a former colleague, and he said, "You sound so happy." And I said, you know what? I loved working and I couldn't imagine, but doing a pivot And that's I love your pivot because it's scary, and I know I think we both know several people who have made big changes in their lives, and it can be such an exciting adventure.
Yes, I love my pivot too, and I love yours.
Yeah.
And that's it for this episode of So Mom. If you loved this conversation, please share it with a friend, leave us a review, and follow us for more. See you next time.